The Donegal village of Fawn, on the shore of Lough Swilly, the lake of 1,000 eyes, nestling at the foot of Gollin Hill. Fawn's monastic roots date back to the 6th century, when the Abbot Mura, one of St Columba's followers, founded his monastery here. The ruins of his church and the cross remain, while the local patron saint has lent his name to churches, schools and generations of children. It is a little-known fact that buried in the overgrown graveyard surrounding the ruins of the old church lies one of the area's most illustrious and yet largely unsung daughters. A woman who during the course of her short life helped to change forever the whole ethos of workhouse care, the nursing pioneer, Agnes Jones. The Joneses. Father Joseph, Mother Elizabeth, Agnes and her 2 younger siblings Josie and Fred were a military family used to following Joseph's regiment around the world. They eventually settled in Fawn due to Elizabeth's ill health, and it was here in Fawn House that her story really begins.
The title pen. Let's go.
Agnes, wait! Do you think you could make Mother well again?
I wish I could. No. Come on!
Ill health was to dominate the girl's adolescence. Elizabeth Jones had always been frail and appeared never to fully recover her strength after the birth of her youngest child, Fred. Joseph would never travel far again, and Agnes, who herself suffered hearing difficulties, was prone to debilitating migraine and its understood bouts of self-analysis and depression. Perhaps it was in this context that she resolved to devote her life to nursing the sick.
Mother remains in poor health and Fred is a handful of mischief. Sometimes I fear he's getting out of control. Fred! Fred, stop that!
What are you doing?
Writing.
Boring.
Sometimes it's good to keep a record of things.
What things?
Just things.
Let me see.
Now you're all wet. November the 10th, 1846. Today I am 14, quite grown up. By now, Father says I should know what path my life is taking. I still believe my life will be spent caring for the sick. I don't yet know how, but it's what I shall do. Father's health is deteriorating. He talks of sending Josie and myself away to school.
Do you want to help me with Mother's things?
She's not fit to travel, Agnes.
Does she have a choice?
The family moved for a time to Dublin, and Agnes continued her studies there. At her tutor's suggestion, she began teaching in one of the hedge or ragged schools near Lurgard.
And that is the story of the children of Lear. Anyone have any questions?
Have you ever been in a proper school, Miss Jones?
Well, would you rather be stuck inside than out on a beautiful day like this?
How long you stayed, Miss Jones?
Not for much longer, Kathleen. I'm going to go and teach some children in Connemara. Does anyone know where that is?
The hedge schools provided a basic literacy and numeracy for children who would otherwise have received no education. On realising the importance of education for the young people of the remote and impoverished region of Connemara, she began raising funds to pay for schoolmasters' salaries and tending to the local sick.
Miss Jones is on her way. Where is she? Rush.
Stay back from your sister now, Seamus.
It wasn't our fault,
She went too close to the fire.
I warned you. I told you this would happen.
She needs a doctor.
Oh, the poor child.
Lord, help her.
Water causes the skin to peel away.
Daddy was putting the fire out.
He did what he thought was best. Can you fetch me some flour? And some clean sheets. And it must be clean, otherwise we risk infection.
She's going to die.
No, she's not. She's not gonna die, Mary. She'll be alright. Won't she?
Only God knows that.
Back in Fawn, in Agnes's absence, there were big changes. Josephine had married her curate, Robert Higginbottom, and together the two established what was an exhausting hands-on ministry amongst the sick and impoverished members of their community. To Josephine fell also the care of their mother, who was largely bedridden. Fred was to emigrate to Australia.
She won't, Edith.
I have to try.
You need to keep your own strength up. You're worn out with your mother. She expects too much of you.
Don't say that. She's not well.
And you are. You're very pale, Josie.
I must take this to Mother.
1856 saw the end of the Crimean War. The war had been a blundering, needlessly costly affair, where the commanders of both sides had proved themselves hopelessly inept. Yet this conflict, where more men had died from disease than on the battlefield, had established the foundations of modern-day nursing. The intervention of Florence Nightingale and the first teams of Nightingale nurses effectively reduced the mortality rate by more than 40%, and that in spite of primitive conditions and basic resources. It was decided at a public meeting in London to build on this success by setting up a training school for nurses based at St Thomas's Hospital.
What are you reading?
It's from Agnes. Dearest Jay, 1,000 loving thanks for your letter, and my prayers are with you as I read of the fever epidemic sweeping through our parish. You must be exhausted working with the sick.
I feel that my own calling is to London, not to a mission but to St Thomas's Hospital as a probationer, a Nightingale nurse. Just seeing those words in writing excites me. I know Mother still feels that full-time nursing is too strenuous for me, and not really for a woman of our background.
And I do not wish to cause her distress, especially as Fred prepares to emigrate.
Josephine's life as a minister's wife came to an untimely end when Higginbottom contracted a fever from his flock and died. His memorial stands here in St Colum's Cathedral in Derry. Agnes began corresponding with Florence Nightingale. She resolved to fulfil her God-given vocation and enrol as a probationer. The news came as no surprise, of course, to Josephine, who had long known Agnes's ambitions, but it would have to be kept from their mother, who always expressed concerns about the morality of the profession. So it was with some apprehension that Agnes began what she was later to describe as a year's hard and regular training, without which I would have been nowhere. With her allowance of 3 plain brown dresses and aprons and 10 shillings, she moved into a wing of St Thomas's to train in everything from studying anatomy, attending operations, applying poultices and fomentations, to becoming competent in cooking gruel. For the newly graduated nurse Agnes Jones, there was a short spell working in London hospitals before the call came to Liverpool. It was at this time a city whose population was expanding rapidly, due in no small way to the influx of Irish families, many of whom were famine immigrants who had left Derry Quay in search of a new life in America, only to find their escape to the New World abandoned in the squalor of the Merseyside slums. Dr. W.H. Duncan's study of the city's problem at this time was to become one of the first statistical surveys of an immigrant population in Britain. It paints a grim picture of overcrowding, poor sanitation, foul water supply, epidemic and hunger. Husbands were separated from wives, children from parents, for a regime of hard work, harsh punishments and meagre rations. A situation culminating in the harsh reality of Liverpool's Brownlow Hill. According to a Royal Commission report of 1834, the Brownlow workhouse was a mass exhibition of filth and vermin, and the unfortunate individuals inside, clothed in rags, unwashed and eaten by disease. By the time of Agnes's arrival in 1865, it seems little had changed. It was the great philanthropic pioneer, William Rathbone, who first drew public attention to the squalor there.
110 deaths this year already. It's preposterous. There must be neglect on someone's part.
But William, they are already dying when they are taken in.
Then let them be taken in sooner.
It's simply not feasible. The cost of feeding and clothing them is too great. And as for medical treatment, well...
Doctors' bills are expensive, sir. And when they are hopeless cases...
more than their lives are worth.
And who among us, gentlemen, is qualified to decide that? Let the doctor call daily. Instruct the warden. Do you understand, sir?
Yes, sir.
If people are dying in our workhouse, Mr. Chadwick, then we are failing them.
Sir, I feel you're missing out on a most important fact.
Which is, Mr. Turner?
Look at the accounts. We're into a clear profit.
That is hardly why the poor laws exist. Is it, sir? It would seem it is you who is missing his facts.
Incensed that his church was paying lip service to providing for the destitute while making a profit from their misery, he personally funded a 3-year overhaul of the workhouse system. He thought an Irish woman might empathise with the famine migrants. On Florence Nightingale's advice, he asked Agnes Jones to take charge.
How long have you been lying like this? What's your name?
Kitty.
Have you a husband, Kitty?
He's in the men's ward. If he's still alive. They keep us apart here. Husbands, wives, children.
Your children?
We've none left now. Are you a Catholic?
I'm Anglican.
It's little odds. We need all the help we can get.
Well, I'll be giving out some medication shortly, and I'll make sure that you get a fresh bed and some water. Now, could you eat a little soup?
They probably steal the bread from it. They take the eye from your head.
Warden. This woman's bed linen is filthy. Who was on duty here last night?
She sold that today.
And she tells me she's not allowed to see her husband.
They work harder that way.
Yes, well, I'm the superintendent here now, so that's all about to change.
Now listen here, miss.
Now, you go fetch me some fresh bed linen and some water.
Despite widespread resistance and a few minor setbacks, Agnes persisted. Her reading and writing groups flourished. New wards were opened up, hygiene improved, and the kitchens and dining areas were overhauled to provide simple, nutritious meals.
All right, you step forward. Lice. Burn his clothes and shave his head.
Thieving bitch!
I'll cut your hands off.
You touch me and you'd have dead women.
Get me! Get your hands off me! What is going on?
I said, what is going on?
Thieves and beggars, Miss Jones.
I've warned you already, haven't I?
Get a move on the bloody lot here. There's work waiting.
Give it to me, please. Do you sell it in the street for porter or gin? Is that it? Your breath is appalling. Any member of staff found under the influence of alcohol will be sent home and their wages will be deducted. If it happens more than once, you will be dismissed.
Then Christmas came, a Christian festival which had previously gone unmarked in the workhouse, but not this year. It was hard work, often dispiriting. In her letters to Josephine, she despaired of what she saw as the ever-increasing gap between rich and poor in Liverpool. And within the walls of the workhouse were confined the poorest of the poor. Of all misery in the mass, no department was so long overlooked as the workhouse paupers, she wrote. Jails have been visited and reformed. Lunatic asylums have opened their long-closed doors to official inspectors, and the deeds of oppression and cruelty they once witnessed are now tales of the past. But who could say a word for the poor of the workhouses? On one level, Agnes Jones was fighting her friend William Rathbone's battle with the church to ensure long-term commitment to the reform and funding of the workhouses. This she achieved in the acceptance of her report to the Select Vestry on 7th of April 1867, which accepted and validated her ethos beyond doubt. But she was also fighting for the future of nursing as a whole, to ensure it remained in the control of trained health professionals and not those who merely administer the purse strings. She told Rathbone, "This will be my legacy."
Dearest Josie, it is almost midnight, but I must return your letter and let you know more about my work here. I am glad Mother is feeling better. A hospital is a sad place, but a workhouse, it almost seems as if over so many of these beds, no hope must be written. Already I have begun the task of reorganising the wards ready for the arrival of my fellow sisters next month. I am in the process of setting up a small library too. I look forward so much to your visit later this year. Your loving and tired sister, Agnes. P.S. Lest this sound like I am complaining, let me tell you that Mr. Rathbone described me yesterday as the picture of happiness, and I know that I am completely at home here.
By the time her sister Josephine visited in October 1865, Agnes had been joined by 12 trained nurses and 7 probationers who were themselves then trained on the job. New wards were opened, administration streamlined, and the comforts Agnes had introduced, family liaison, letters home, flowers, pictures and books, were taken for granted.
Okay, Nurse Darnay, have the bedding's all changed?
Yes, nurse. I'll start preparing the medication.
Oh, very well, nurse. Mr. Thompson says he's dying. Shall I fetch Miss Jones?
Mrs. Jones doesn't need to waste her time in the likes of Mr. Thompson.
The only thing wrong with Mr. Thompson is his dirty mouth, Nurse Wright.
I want to die at home away from you bitches.
Good to see everyone's in good spirits.
I must say, Agnes, Mother would be proud if she could see what you've done here.
I am determined to provide Mr. Rathbone with a report that shows that his faith in me has been justified.
Mother is well, Agnes. She sends her love.
And I to her.
Quite what Josephine's real feelings towards her sister's work were, we shall never know. But Josephine's visit was to be a short one. Liverpool was on the verge of a cholera epidemic, and admissions to the workhouse were increasing daily. Having secured the future of the in-service training programme for nurses, a triumph she described as her legacy, Agnes faced a dispiriting setback when she was forced to abandon the second training scheme aimed at the female pauper assistants.
While her contemporaries shied away from any reports that could be perceived as unsympathetic, it's clear she suffered from bouts of severe depression. There are references to her being spiritually as well as physically overtaxed in every way, as well as having an oversensitive conscience and a morbid self-condemnation.
Sometimes I wonder if this city contains some of the vilest individuals in the country. They are discharged, cured, then they are admitted 3 weeks later with delirium, and their clothes have not been changed in the meantime. Many of them have developed sores and ulcers. Am I teaching them nothing? Is there no real hope?
The Board of Governors has licensed me to act in the face of extreme inebriation, debauchery and disorder.
What about starvation, corruption and disease? Does it mention those too?
Sign, please.
These people will die. They will starve in the streets or they will die of exposure. Have you no conscience?
Oh, spare me your Hibernian temper. We have to keep order.
The power of scriptural instruction, it seemed, appeared hopeless in the face of hunger and disease. Sometimes we know her own composure was challenged to breaking point. The governor referred to Agnes as that hot-headed Presbyterian woman from Ulster, and regularly referred in his records to Hibernian rows. Yet Agnes refused to take a short, though badly needed holiday in Ireland. The time was just never right.
Put away your ledger, Agnes.
If I cannot be on the wards, I can at least keep the records up to date. Some of the sisters are worse with typhoid than I am, Nurse Gilpin.
I have sent for Dr. Drake. He will examine you in the morning.
I will be at work in the morning. Read this. A woman was brought in yesterday who was in such despair that when her infant was born, she slit its throat. Another baby was found in the streets, almost frozen to death, with its cord around its neck. It was only a few hours old. We were able to revive it.
Finish your letter. I will post it for you in the morning, before the doctor comes.
Tell the doctor not to be worrying with me in the morning.
The strength, physically at least, was no longer there. And Agnes Jones died 4 days later on the 19th of February 1868. She was 35 and had been at the workhouse less than 3 years. 3 years in which she revolutionised its existence and strengthened the foundations for the future of the nursing profession. The streets around the workhouse were thronged with mourners as her coffin began its journey to Donegal. Inmates are reported as weeping openly or standing in silent grief as the cortege passed. Yet responses to her mentor and friend William Rathbone's plans for a memorial were lukewarm, to say the least. Her sister Josephine responded, asking him on her behalf not to think of such a thing. The letter also exonerated him from any blame for letting her sister overwork.
Florence Nightingale was to pay great tribute with her published biography of Agnes, Una and the Lion, depicting Agnes as the founder of workhouse nursing, taking on the lion of bureaucracy.
Rathbone commissioned the respected Roman sculptor Peter Tenerani to carve a memorial statue. Originally erected in the workhouse itself, its inscription, "In service she lost her life." Best of all, the vestry members Agnes had converted to her philosophy of care remained committed morally and financially to continuing her work and the probationers' training scheme.
By the time of her death, Agnes had transformed the workhouses from places she had come, in her own words, to close the eyes of the dead, into havens of order, hygiene, medical care, education and spiritual instruction.
Agnes Jones remains a legendary figure, even a folk heroine in Liverpool to this day. She is commemorated in both its Anglican and Catholic cathedrals.
Her story ends where we started, beside the busy main road that links Derry to Buncrana. Agnes herself lies alongside her father, her simple grave now tended by well-wishers.